Hi everyone. Today, we're going to be walking you through a 5-minute demo of Azure Functions with Python. By the end of the demo, I hope it becomes apparent how easy it is to leverage serverless solutions in Azure with VS Code. To get started, we'll quickly create and deploy a simple serverless Hello World application before moving on to a more interesting sample function that pulls your GitHub repo data. To follow along, you'll need Visual Studio Code with the Python and Azure Functions extension, as well as an Azure subscription. Navigating to the Azure Functions extension, I can follow the prompts to create a Hello World application. If you have not logged in yet, you'll be asked to do so now. If I click the Create New Project icon, I'll follow a set of prompts to create a new project. First, it'll ask me to select my folder. Next, my language. Finally, it'll scan my computer and determine what interpreters I can use. You can also set a trigger for your function. This will determine when your function is activated. For the purpose of this demo, I'm going to use an HTTP trigger so I can use an HTTP call to activate it. Next, I'll set the name for my function. In this case, I'll leave it at the default HTTP trigger 1. Finally, I'll set an authorization level. By choosing anonymous, it means anyone can call my function without any secret keys in the URL. Right now, the function is getting created, and we can see that in the bottom right. If I navigate to the Explorer, I can see the extension created the folder and file structure I need to run my Hello World application. A bulk of the code lives in the init.py file, and if I read through the code over here, what's happening is it's taking a name parameter from the URL in the initial request, and we're outputting that as a return as an HTTP response in the string below. If I hit F5, I can turn on debugger mode and run it locally to make sure it works before deploying to Azure. This helps make the deployment cycle significantly faster, so I'm not having to deploy each time I want to test my function. To validate that it's working, we'll go ahead and grab the localhost URL in our output box below, and we'll drop it into the browser so that we can test out whether or not the logic is working. As you can see, the string that's returned in the browser matches exactly what we'd expect from the code. Deploying to Azure is a fairly simple process. First, we'll navigate back over to the Azure Functions extension, where we'll go ahead and click this blue icon here, which lets us deploy the app. From there, we'll follow the prompts to create a new function app and deploy it to Azure, giving it a name, select our runtime, select our region, and what's happening now is the function app is going to go ahead and get created. Through the magic of video editing, I'm going to make this process a little bit quicker for everyone at home, but it should take about 30 to 60 seconds. Now that my function is deployed to Azure, there's a few different ways I can interact with it in VS Code. If I right-click the function app, I have the options to open in Portal, which opens up my browser to the exact resource in Azure, so then I can quickly explore that function. I can also start the streaming logs, and in doing so, I can validate that it's working as expected in the cloud. Finally, if I open up the tree, I can navigate to the actual function, and there, if I right-click, I can copy the function URL and trigger the function just like we did locally. In doing so, passing my name as a parameter, I get the exact output I expected when I ran it locally.
Great. Now let's look at a more interesting example, where we'll use Azure Functions to call the GitHub API and return the most recent issues in a repo. The first thing I want to talk to you about is dependencies. Whatever packages we're using for a function, we need to make sure are called out in a requirements.txt file so Azure knows to install them. If there's a specific version number that you need installed, you can simply add an equal sign and the number associated to the version you're looking for. Now the rest of the code I'm editing lives in this init.py file, and similarly to what we did with the Hello World app, where we had the name being passed through as a parameter, I'm using these L1 and L2 variables that I've created to establish what the repo name is going to be. The rest of the code should look very similar to any kind of local script you might be running. Here I'm gathering the API root, passing in a bunch of variables to get the response object, and from there I'm creating a data frame, looping through additional requests to get additional pages, where I eventually output the results to the browser, specified with this line right here. Next thing we're going to do is actually deploy this to Azure. And before we do, I wanted to share one little tip, and that is you can actually use breakpoints within your function so that as you're testing it, it's a little bit easier to understand what's going on. So again, to deploy to Azure, we're going to head over to the Azure extension, where we'll go to functions and kind of follow that same process we did with the Hello World app. We'll create a new app and we'll give this a unique name. We'll select the runtime we want to use in the region. and in about 30 seconds, the app will be deployed. You all some time. I used a little video editing magic again to speed up the deployment, but it does take about 30 seconds or so to deploy to Azure. Now let's test out the function. Again, we'll go down here and we'll right click and copy function URL. And the one thing that you'll notice is very different this time around is you actually have a kind of an authentication code here, and that prevents the URL from being public so anyone in the world can hit it. So again, if I add my L1 and L2, Microsoft and Python VS Code, what you're going to see is the same functionality we kind of expect. It goes ahead and pulls all of the issues that we've seen recently, sorts them by newest to oldest, and you can see here I have about 120 or so from the loops that I did. So there you have it. That's Azure Functions in a nutshell. It's really great for a bunch of data processing, machine learning, cloud automation, or simply just automating any scripts that are sitting locally on your machine that you want to push up into the cloud. I hope this was really helpful. If you need any more info or tips or tricks, check out the Microsoft documentation. The quick starts are great. There's a ton of different samples from things using TensorFlow to data pipeline processes. If you have any questions, please just reach out.